Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is the simplest cloud platform for developers and teams with products like Droplets, Spaces, Kubernetes, load balancers, block storage, and pre-built one-click apps. You can deploy, manage, and scale cloud applications faster and more efficiently on DigitalOcean. Whether you're running one virtual machine or 10,000, DigitalOcean makes managing your infrastructure way too easy. Head to do.co/changelog. Again, do.co/changelog.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Welcome to Go Time, a podcast featuring a diverse panel and special guests discussing cloud infrastructure, distributed systems, microservices, Kubernetes, Docker, and also Go. We record live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Join the community that's live with us in real time during the show in the Go Time FM channel and Go for Slack. Follow us on Twitter. We're at GoTimeFM. Listen live at changelog.com/live or subscribe at changelog.com/GoTime. And now on to the show.
Hello there, and welcome to Go Time. I'm Matt Ryer, and welcome to a very special fireside edition of Go Time, where we essentially just get very close to the microphone. It's very intimate. We'll be chatting with each other and asking each other questions, and also taking your questions. You can tweet at us. If you tweet at me at Matt Ryer, MATRYER, I'll ask your question on the show, or you can join in the conversation on Go for Slack in the Go Time FM channel. So I'll introduce my fellow hosts today. It's JB, JC, and JD. It's Johnny Borsico, John Calhoun, and Yana B. Dugan. Hello.
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 How are we doing?
I think we're all doing good. I hope we're doing good.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, so I thought we could start off. This is something that I always wonder about other devs, because of course we're a busy bunch often. If we're lucky, we're busy. And sometimes we either aren't really able to do side projects for whatever reason in our companies or in our day jobs, or maybe we just don't have the time or the energy or whatever after doing a full day. So given that, if you could just have 2 weeks to build anything, to do anything in Go, what would you do? Say you've just got 2 weeks, or if you need more time, you can have it. It's really relaxed. What would you do? Is there anything in mind that you'd build or work on, or is there anything you're interested in exploring?
I guess I can kick this one off. So building something isn't necessarily something I'd do. Well, I guess I'd build something, but what I'd more be focused on is I'd love to spend some more time looking at different aspects of how we design code and just spending more time on that. Specifically, I would love to actually build a project using globals and all sorts of things, like basically just leaving globals everywhere, like a global DB connection, a global set of templates, things like that, and just set it all up and actually write tests for it to sort of show, what that looks like.
Is that just to give Peter Borg an aneurysm?
No. If I had the time, what I'd like to do is take that and then gradually refactor it to something that doesn't use the globals, and to actually see, in each little refactor, how that changes things, and actually see what changes, how the tests change, how you can actually tell what's required a little bit better in some areas. And maybe even in some areas I might find that, globals weren't actually as bad as we made them out to be. Because I know in my own stuff, there's a couple times where I'll do all this jumping through hoops to make globals not necessary. And at the end of the day, I'm I don't know that I actually needed to do this. I think the one example that always comes to my mind is whenever I'm building a web application where I'm generating HTML from the server, I will have all this stuff that I do to make my HTML templates not global. And if I just had a global registry of all my templates that were parsed, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But, I try to avoid it for all these reasons. And then at the end of the day, I'm I'm not really sure it's worth it, because when I go to read the files, I often require them to be in a certain file structure on a local file system in a certain spot to work anyway. So, and that might be configurable, but there's still limitations to it. And at the end of the day, it's is it really worth making it so they can completely customize the the file structure of all these template files versus like just put them in the right structure.
Yeah, there's that is an interesting point. We tend to talk a lot in terms of absolutes, and we'll say like, don't use global variables as a general rule, because if you're just getting started, or if you don't want to have to worry too much about some of the other aspects of code, then I can see why these rules help. They guide you and just prevent a kind of whole class of problems. But like with almost everything, and it's rare, and I don't know that there are even any where I would say, absolutely, this is the answer to something. I think there is a lot of gray area, and sometimes, a global variable is just so easy. And in the context of what you're doing, like this is just my little program that I'm going to run, or just me and one other or something. Versus, this is a big open source package, and I think that would change things. But yeah, I can see sometimes that being the case. It's an interesting one. But do you, John, you do a lot of teaching, don't you? So is your interest in that because you then want to teach people?
It would partially be that, but I think it's partially just like exploration for myself to see like, is it really worth doing it here? Because I mean, like, I think we get in these habits of like, I do it this way because I've been doing it this way. And sometimes it's like, are the trade-offs of what I'm doing actually worth it? And spending some time exploring that would be useful for like, long term. But it's just hard to find that time of like, can I find, a couple hours to actually try these two different approaches and see which one's better whenever one's working, and like, I've got a lot of other things to do.
Yeah, I think the same thing applies to testing as well, because I've been through all different kind of cycles of TDD and all kinds of things where there's been times when I've been very adamant that everything is red-green tested. So I would have a unit test fail before I write any of the main program code, and be very strict with myself about that. And I found that it had some benefits, but of course the trade-off was that the tests were so tightly bound to exactly what my program code was. It was a little bit like having a test for a CSS file that just says like, this text color has to be red, and then in another file you say, make sure that text color is red. You're just saying the same thing twice, and that wasn't quite useful. So then I kind of go the other way and look at, let's do just end-to-end testing. So don't worry about the internals. As long as the whole system works, I know it's working. That had, again, benefits and other problems. And one of the downsides to that was you didn't get any kind of laser focus on where things had broken. You just knew that the things weren't working as they should. You didn't have much help on where the problems were, or what the impact was that you'd had that was unexpected. So yeah, and I think I'd do the same thing with what you're talking about, John, so that we try it have a little project and unit test it very tightly, have the same project and just have integration tests, and then play around somewhere in the middle, because probably that's where the perfect solution is somewhere. Probably not a perfect solution, but a solution maybe. So, okay, anyone else? What would you build if you could do anything? Let me ask you this first then. Can you work on side projects?
Let me
talk to my lawyer.
Hang on, I have to text him real quick. Well, so time. Like when you asked that question, I was just thinking, man, if I had like 2 weeks of uninterrupted time, what I would do with that. And really, my mind immediately went to teaching, because that's something I enjoy doing like a lot, but slightly different from sort of the live teaching. So recently I've been thinking about, okay, you enjoy teaching and you enjoy doing it live. There's something about sort of seeing that light bulb go on in somebody's face, right? There's something about that I just find magical. I enjoy that tremendously. But at the same time, I do realize that, okay, I'm still one person. How do I scale myself, right, so to speak? How do I basically do that, have a sort of wider impact, right? At least the kind of impact I want to have. And I've been thinking, okay, maybe the way to do that is to dive into sort of recorded, courses where, maybe like a YouTube channel and try to live up to, the likes of Francesc and Just for Funk or something along those lines, basically to try and sort of, I mean, I'm not going to use, grandiose terms like change the world and any of that nonsense, but basically, I'm basically just to find a way to to reach more people, I think is what I would like to do, right? So having recorded courses and making some for free, available for free, and making some for paid as well, because I do have a family to take care of, that kind of thing. But really, that's where my mind went, just basically trying to find a way to reach more people and hopefully serve more people.
Yeah, the nice thing is when you teach somebody something, Johnny, you kind of enable them to then do things that they couldn't do before, so that you get this sort of exponential effect. And I think that's easy to overlook, but so important. And so, yeah, I think that's great. And I've never been in one of your classes, but I have heard good things about them. So, yeah. Do you tend to do that at conferences then?
Yeah, I do. I do them at conferences, usually a pre-conference workshop, and also I do the GoBridge workshops. Actually, this is a good time for me to mention that if you live in the Baltimore area, there is a GoBridge workshop coming up on the 7th of December next month. So this will be my last GoBridge workshop of the year, and basically, I just wanted to sort of give the opportunity for those that are looking to enter the year, with a new skill, provide the opportunity, the learning opportunity for them to do so. So if you are listening to this and you know somebody in the Baltimore metro area, DC, Virginia, that kind of thing, that could benefit from a full day workshop to learn Go, this is a great opportunity to do so.
And how do they find out more information about that?
Well, they would go to gobridge.org, and that will probably link them to the GitHub repo. I forgot we've changed that now. Actually, if you go on meetup.com and you look for the Baltimore Go meetup, that is one of the events listed. So you can just either Google for it or go to meetup.com /Baltimore Go. I think Baltimore Golang to make it easier to find, and then basically you'll see the event, and if you are in the target demographic, I encourage you to sign up.
Great, awesome stuff. These are good answers so far. Another question I had was, what's the thing, if you had to pick, which you do, is the thing that grinds your...
I still have to answer, Matt.
Well, yeah, don't forget about Yana.
Oh, sorry, I just assumed that
if we run out of time, it's actually okay. This question really hit me hard because I have exactly 2 weeks at the end of this year to do whatever I want to do.
Ooh.
And the question is, probably I will use Go, right, if I want to write code. And the question is, what am I going to do? This is more of like an existential crisis type of question from you, probably. There was like one crazy idea I had for a long time. I was wondering if it's possible to highlight some of the concurrency related stuff in a text editor. Like, imagine if a library, if like you're making a call, it starts a Go routine, whatever. You just don't know from the API surface. But it, just starts a Go routine, just runs some stuff in other Go routines and whatever. I wonder if we can highlight in the editor that, some of the pieces here in this block is just going to run in a different Go routine or may run in a different Go routine or whatever. So I was like thinking about this dynamic tool. You just run your program. It just maybe collect some profile or whatever. And then you apply that profile to your text editor and it gives you all this like different colors, like this has been run in this like different Go routines and so on. So it like helps you to, it's not like a perfect solution, but it could be a good experimentation point and may kind of like influence maybe some other people to work on this type of problem. Because, we had this discussion last week. There's no good way to say, hey, I'm just going to run some stuff in a different Go routine. Some libraries are doing a good job documenting this, but some others don't. So that's an interesting area to, work on.
Yeah, would it look like the code coverage stuff where the background kind of changes color? So you might see like red would be used for the main thread, but you kicked off a Go routine somewhere and you can
exactly,
see that
it's the same idea. Yeah,
is that
and you run the program.
Right.
It only can capture, just like the test coverage. Test coverage can only capture the tests you're running. It just kind of like goes over those lines as it's running. So it's going to be the same. You run your program. It will only capture the cases that like you actually executed, But it might give you some hints, like maybe, I don't know, maybe over time, maybe it could be an incremental thing. Maybe it could be even like a global repository of something. This is just like a very rough idea. I just want to, experiment. And
it sounds cool.
Thanks.
I don't know his last name. I will look it up. But there's a great talk by Ivan about visualizing concurrency in Go. I don't know if you've seen that.
Exactly, from the GopherCon a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, so anyone, if you haven't seen that, check that out. It is amazing. And I chat to him every time I see him at conferences, and he was kind of talking about maybe even like augmented reality or virtual reality ways of visualizing.
You're just like basically running into your Go routines and all that stuff.
Yeah, you'd be inside somehow and see the things around you. Let's see and maybe you'd be able to actually see hotspots. I don't know if we could somehow visualize the contention or something like that. Imagine being able to go and actually look and see heat spots of where there's things in contention or something. I don't know, but
yeah, it was amazing just to see things in 3D, to be honest. Like I've seen like visualization tools only in 2D, but it made so much sense because you have like one level of more dimension when there's concurrency. And, it was like, I think the right model. So I'm really excited about the virtual reality thing.
Yeah, it finally makes us look like the hackers from the movies as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where, it's like a 3D cube and we'll complete the cube and that's when we know we're finished. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no scope creep in that world. Everything's, it's just when the cube's done, we're done and we can go home. Well, that's all we want, isn't it?
Is that what you would build through 2 weeks, Matt? Some way for us to code in a 3D world?
Well, people have kind of played around with it a little bit. It is a kind of quite an exciting thing. Even just thinking of having a virtual reality headset and then having many monitors in front of you. I mean, it's the most boring possible use of that technology, but it could be essentially like, and you could mix it with the what's actually being seen as well, so that it isn't just like screens only, but you can have other backgrounds, I guess, and things. It's going to look nice, basically. Put it that way.
We're getting off topic slightly, I guess, but that's okay. I saw one cool VR demo where somebody had it where like you actually just saw a JavaScript like editor you were coding in, but like when you made like 3D models and things like that, you'd actually just look to your right and you would see it actually rendering it.
Oh yeah.
So it was like cool. The coolest like use case where it's
Playground.
like, you just get to see it in 3D and you can like walk or move around and sort of see the thing. And like I see stuff like that and I'm like, all right, VR could be awesome if we get there. It's going to take some time, sadly.
Yeah, probably, but they're working on it, aren't they?
Let's hope. All right, now Matt, I suppose you can go to your question.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about if there's anything in Go that would grind one's gears, as it were. That's what the kids say these days, I think.
I actually had to look it up. Just to make sure that it means what I assume it means.
Oh no! Is that
sure,
all right?
Yeah.
Oh, I need to really think more about it before I speak.
I think it's hard as the native English speaker, like all the random phrases and stuff like that don't necessarily make sense out of like if you aren't used to them.
This is kind of like obvious. I mean, it's not that obvious. I mean, it's obvious. You can guess, right?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. I'm in awe by anyone that speaks multiple languages, so I can't really imagine what that's like. So I don't know is the honest answer. I like hearing phrases in other languages translated, and you don't have any of the context or anything. They are brilliant. Some of them are absolutely brilliant.
I should give you a list and like I can score you.
Yeah. Oh, we should do that on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. We should definitely start that. So, speaking of grinding gears, what's the thing that annoys you the most about Go? That was another question I thought might be an interesting one to chat about.
I have a couple of things. I mean, I actually have one specific thing: shadowing. There's like all this like convenience stuff for error types. And then it just sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, or it doesn't quite work what I want it to work like. So it's just very inconsistent. How
would you change it then? Would you just disallow it? So if you try to use it, it says, this variable's already been used in another block, or do you allow it? What would you do? How would you change it?
So currently, they only allow shadowing of errors. right? So if they take it further to allow people to, for convenience to shadow the other variables, I think it would be way too much. So I would say that, like, I think it's fair as it is, but it's annoying because it gives me this like inconsistency. I can see like there's no other way to do this. They can completely disable it, and that would be such an inconvenient thing because, you have like errors all around. So you want to sometimes want to, shadow it for the convenience. But it's just like annoying, and sometimes I need to declare the variable and sometimes I don't. It's just like, I don't know, like I really don't like how inconsistent it sometimes looks. And people are just copy pasting the style sometimes, like, and they're just assuming that that's the only way to do or whatever. So like, not my taste maybe.
Yeah, that thing sometimes when you have to switch the colon equals with the equals, things like those little things, and also not being able to declare a variable without using it has great kind of foundations. But as you're in the weeds of something, sometimes, it would be nice to be able to just declare a variable and just don't use it. Take it out. If the compiler knows you've not used this variable, just take it out. Just know what I mean? I know, like, put a warning on or something, but just pop it out. Don't worry about it. That would be my advice.
I suspect some of that stems from knowing what imports you have and all that stuff. Like, it leads to a lot more things.
Yes, yes.
It's also like the shadowing stuff can be annoying, like you said. If some code changes and now all of a sudden the colon equals doesn't work, it can be annoying when like you have to change a line that has nothing to do with the PR, like, or what you're changing. So it's just like, why did you change this line? It's like the code will not work without me changing that line.
Yes, I agree with you completely. That's why I like the extra comma at the end of lists, because you can just change lines. You don't have to go and reformat another line in an unrelated way. Yeah, completely agree with that.
I wouldn't say grinds my gear as much as
not cool enough.
Yep. Yeah. Perhaps that's not cool enough. Yeah. It's kind of closely related to that is to what Jan was saying, is that I see it often, especially I think the typical example that's given is like if you're in a for loop, right? You have an iterator, you have an I variable or something, and then you're launching a Go routine inside of there. Because of the closure that happens over the variable, you think you can actually use the iterator right inside of your Go routine, inside of your function, and then not realizing that basically you're not really using a copy of that variable, basically using the same reference to it. So your Go routines end up sort of stepping all over each other, right? So I've seen like code like that sort of pop up enough times that I don't quite have a solution for it, but it's just something that's happens often enough. I'm not sure a way around that other than sort of teaching people to, hey, this is actually what happens when you because of the closure. And if you don't pass in a copy of this variable, you're not really, you're going to get unexpected results, right? So
we could probably detect that. And I bet, is there a linter or something that warns, or some warning tool that checks that? I feel like they'd be able to detect that statically. I don't know.
I don't know if there are or not. It wouldn't shock me if it's possible to detect, but one of the issues you run into there is that a beginner who's most likely to run into the issue is the least likely person to have that linter set up. So it's like you're solving a problem that by the time they know to use that tool, they don't necessarily have the problem.
Right. So we need time travel packages. Packages that are time travel enabled.
It would almost have to be like built into stuff, which I don't know. I don't know how that would work. It's not to say that there couldn't be a solution, but...
Right. So instead of doing time travel as a package, you think it should be built in. You think that's the challenge with doing time travel code?
I'm just going to ignore you, Matt.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
So I know, like, for me, one of the things that kind of gets me at times, and this is like a very minor grief, but like, I like avoid using inline structs, or when you just define a struct inside of something. There are a lot of times where I'll avoid doing that simply because like recreating that type then later becomes slightly more annoying. Like you can't just construct the whole thing without being like, oh, and I have a struct here and here are all the fields, and then I have to it just seems like so much extra work at times. So like it would be nice if there was an easier way to do that, because I do think reading inline structs is very useful at times. Like there's all sorts of cases where I'm like, I don't actually need another type. I could just throw this in there. It's just sort of nested data in this type. So that's the type of thing that it would be nice to simplify some of that.
And it must be able to do that because they're statically typed. So it knows the type, doesn't it, at the compile time?
Yeah, like you can do like var t thing, and then like you can do t dot dot a dot b dot c equals something, and like it gives them all 0 values. So like it definitely knows that it's there. It's just a matter of like when you're declaring it or setting it up, it's you have to do it a slightly different way, which I just don't like that it leads to code that it's like, why did you do it this way this time? It's like, well, because I'm using these nested things, it looks a little bit weird if I have to do it that way.
Yeah, again, the same thing. It's nice for the code, if you're doing something, it's nice for there to be a reason for it, not just make things happy. Yeah.
Happy is good.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by StrongDM. Manage and secure remote access to any database, any server, on-prem or in the cloud, and environments. They make it easy for DevOps teams to enforce the security and controls InfoSec teams require. So if your engineers need access, you need StrongDM. So what can StrongDM do for your team? First off, more control, less hassle. Grant or revoke access to any database or server in one command. Use your SSO to manage access to every database, every server and environment. Second, total visibility. StrongDM upgrades your audit logs, log every permission change, every query, every SSH, and every RDP command, and know who issued those changes. And of course, faster SOC 2 compliance, easily enforce access controls, and instantly answer auditors' questions. Head to strongdm.com/GoTime to learn more and request a free demo. Again, strongdm.com/GoTime.
So, next question.
Yes.
Unless you have something, Matt, you wanted to talk about that grinds your gears.
No.
Okay.
Nothing. I don't use that phrase, actually.
So,
try not to.
So since I'm working in a bright pink room right now, or recording from one, and if you haven't seen the tweet, you can go check that out. Basically, the question is, what is your ideal working environment? And that can be room, basically anything, like open work environment, open space versus an office, headphones, what type of music, anything like that. I'm just kind of curious, like, what do you guys prefer? What makes you productive?
Definitely not open spaces.
Yeah. That was the first thing I thought too. Definitely not open plan offices. I have a feeling that they're just like way cheaper or something. Like there's just a really obvious reason why they exist.
I think it depends sometimes. Like sometimes in the beginning of a project, you just like want to design, you want to just, discuss like for hours and whatever. I mean, it's nice if you can just go to a meeting room, whatever, but like sometimes you want to be in the same environment and still keep, debating or whatever. But, open space is also not really good for this type of stuff because you don't want to disturb the people around you. But maybe I've seen this other model, this like old school offices for 4 or 5 people. You just put the team in, your like immediate peers, and you are working from the same office. It has doors and everything, so you can actually, close the door. You can have as many meetings as possible if that's what you're going for. So I really personally like my sofa a lot. And recently I realized that I'm like way more productive when I'm working from home because, I don't have any interruptions or anything.
Yeah.
I still think the open office space was like a recruiting tactic.
Why?
Because like as a new college grad, if you walk into an office space with a bunch of cubicles and then you walk into like an open space like Facebook office or something, the one just seems like a much like more like it seems like a better environment from where you're coming from. Like you don't necessarily
because you're a fool.
Yeah, because like you don't know any better at that point. And like a lot of the companies I've seen push them hire a lot of new grads. So like it's almost like they're like optimizing for that in some ways. I don't know if that's actually true, but it seems that way. Because I've worked in the cubicle spaces, and I get when you walk in the office, you're like, this looks kind of like corporate and boring and like not cool. But at the same time, it's nice to be able to sit down and be like, this is my space. Like nobody's bugging me. I don't hear as much.
So I'm going to speak from experience here, because once upon a time, I was in an environment that specifically designed the office space to be an open floor plan with glass walls, if you can call them that. Even the conference room was kind of like a fishbowl, right? It was glass, and if you walked into the office, as you walked by, even if were having meetings in that office, in that conference room. It was all glass. It looked beautiful. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
Could you like write on it?
Yes, you could. Yeah, absolutely. It was meant for that. It was beautiful, and it was basically it was at an agency, a digital agency, right? So there was a lot of sort of creative folks seated all over the place, and when you walked in there, the effect when you walked in there, you could see people working on illustrations, design work, doing really beautiful stuff, and I think that was part of the reason for that, right? If you bring a prospect into the office, we bring a customer into the office, the impact, right, that brings, like immediately you get hit with that. You're like, okay, this place is serious, right? The coders didn't sit up front. The designers did because they were doing the cool stuff, right? The coders, I mean, we just look at text all day. There's nothing, appealing about that even when you first walk into the office. But, that was part of the appeal of it, right? It was like modern looking. It had less of a like nice open and airy feel to it. I mean, in your own, if you think about it, in your own home, I mean, in my home right now, I'd like to knock down a few walls, make it open, make it airy, make it, feng shui or whatever, you want that. But, it didn't take long before we quickly realized, okay, this is a sort of a focus killer. If you're trying to get, it's fine to look at, but if you're trying to get work done with all the buzzing, the activity, everything going on around you, you just can't get anything done, which is why, it didn't take long, like a month in, everybody got, noise canceling headphones because, we just couldn't get anything done.
How does the visual noise works like? Is it as disruptive as, noise?
It's an echoey like noise. Somebody could be having like basically you could have two people sitting on the other side of the office,
wow,
and you could still hear them like if you're on the other end because there's nothing in between.
Yeah, it sounds like the entire office was a stage or something. Stage for the customers. You're just running a show.
It was literally, it was like a performance. We were performing work. It was incredible.
I'm a big believer in letting the engineering team decide how it works, and I wonder how many would choose that kind of setup.
Well, let's not go to the extreme now. I mean, it's. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like the look of the office. I like the feel of the office. It did feel like welcoming in some ways because I sort of had a penchant towards the nice eclectic and sort of modern look. I think these days I've kind of swung back around to the more cozy and warm kind of feel, but it did have an appeal to it that you walked into the office, you're like, okay, these folks are serious, right? So, but it was just that there was a downside to it that we just didn't know because at the time, this was like well over like a decade and a half ago. At the time, open floor plan was the thing, right? Everybody wanted to have an open floor plan. It was like articles were being written. It's kind of funny because the same, I don't know if it's the same people, but you used to see articles about how open floor plan is the new ish, right? And then now you're seeing a bunch of articles saying, no, that it's not ish. It's just, crap. Don't do it. I mean, it's like the pendulum has swung, right? You go back and forth, which is why that's really just a warning that, hey, whatever's hot and cool today, just, give it a moment, settle down a little bit, learn to see what's what, and then you make a decision on your own. Just don't get carried away.
Yeah, that's great advice. I like working remotely and have done that now for the last 5 years. And sometimes I miss like the office, and occasionally I have to go out into town, or I go because I want to. If any of my friends are listening, which they're not. But you
don't have friends?
No, I do have friends, but they don't listen to Go Time.
Oh.
JS Party, mate. It's our competitor. Yeah. So and I miss it. I miss the kind of atmosphere that you can get when you are co-located. But for practical productivity, I can't beat screen sharing. Working with people. Have the audio on, so you're just chatting, one of you sharing the screen. I do pair programming a lot, and so it's nice because you're not physically next to the person, but you're having the same kind of experience.
How do you pair program without physical contact? I've never been in a situation where there's like pair programming going on. Like, how does it work nowadays?
Yeah, well, you just share the screen. That's how we do it. I do it with David. We just share the screen, and one of us is driving and the other one's watching the screen. And we sort of build things together, and we get the immediate knowledge share that happens automatically because we're both doing this. We also get the two minds at the same time, and often we think about things in slightly different ways, or we have different perspectives, or we care about different things. So what we end up with is usually a pretty good first version of things, because it's almost like the second version already, because it's had two of us build it. We also share a lot philosophically, like we will happily just throw things away. We're not precious about, even if we spend a lot of time building it, we know that there's a lot of value that isn't just in the code. So throwing the code away and restarting, things like that, which are very privileged practices to be able to do. I know a lot of dev teams, that sounds like a kind of a crazy luxury that they just don't have. To some dev teams, testing sounds like a luxury. I mean, I think they're necessary, and that's what you have to do if you can, is fight for those things. So it's nice because there was actually a piece of tech. There's an app called Screen Hero that Skype bought. And Skype, it may have it. I'm not sure if they've got it integrated or not. But that was great because it was basically screen share with audio. And it gave you two mouse pointers. One was basically fake, but it gave you the impression that the other person was sat there with you and they had their own pointer on your screen. So as you're talking, you can see them circling something when they're drawing your attention to it, pointing about some code and say, it's this, or what about this? And they can even type too. So you could both type. So someone, if they know, oh no, this is how we should do it, look, they can just jump in at any point. Stuff like that was just so useful for us. And we just got so good at that. We got so used to that way of working. If we meet up now in real life, we tend not to be very productive. We try and do other things other than coding. We don't meet up to code or anything like that, just because works so well for us.
Do you think that it's also a thing between you two? Like, I find it very intimidating to pair program myself, especially with people like who I've never worked with before. So maybe it's just kind of also like just like the environment, and you feel productive because of the specific peer. Anyways, it's slightly a different topic probably.
No, but it's an interesting point, because you're right. You do have to, it doesn't work with everybody. It's not the same experience. In fact, every pair programming session is unique. And because it's two people, if it's a different person, of course, it's going to be a different dynamic. And yeah, we've just found a way where it's okay for us to be wrong. We aren't embarrassed if one of us is wrong. If you can get that in your team, I think you're really ahead of the curve, because you have to be able to be wrong about things. Otherwise, we're going to be too careful with ideas, and we're going to have to do too much research before. And there might be people in the team that have a similar idea, have maybe tried things before. You get a lot of benefits from having that space where you can just be wrong and it's okay. Things like that definitely help.
This episode is brought to you by GoCD. With native integrations for Kubernetes and a Helm chart to quickly get started, GoCD is an easy choice for cloud-native teams. With GoCD running on Kubernetes, you define your build workflow and let GoCD provision and scale build infrastructure on the fly for you. GoCD installs as a Kubernetes native application, which allows for ease of operations, easily upgrade and maintain GoCD using Helm, scale your build infrastructure elastically with a new Elastic agent that uses Kubernetes conventions to dynamically scale GoCD agents. GoCD also has first-class integration with Docker registries, easily compose, track, and visualize deployments on Kubernetes. Learn more and get started at gocd.org/Kubernetes. Again, gocd.org/Kubernetes.
With the pairing, I keep thinking that even with things that I've taught or talked about or explained like a dozen times on, wherever, right? The moment I get on a pairing session, it's almost like I'm seized by this sort of I think Jana might have hit on the nail. Like this, they had the nail on the head. Basically, this intimidation that I feel like there's a pressure to be right. Like like you're saying, Matt. you established a rapport, right? Especially, you know, I think that comes with if you've been working with somebody for a while, but you established a rapport that to the fact where you can be wrong. But, you know, right now at work, you know, I get to pair with, you know, with folks from other teams, and sometimes we're pairing for the first time, and they say basically saying, "Hey, I'm trying to do this Go thing." You know, they say you're the person to help, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I feel that pressure. It's like, oh crap, okay, I don't know who told you what. Now there's this expectation that I'm going to solve all problems, you know, related to Go. And then now, like, I feel like, okay, we're talking and we're explaining something. And I'm like, okay, normally it would be me sitting and looking at the problem and thinking of the best way to deal with it. And now you're asking me to do this in real time, right? Like I have to basically say, okay, how would I do this? How would I do this? And then they're sitting there waiting for me to sort of provide, you know, some guidance and answer. And I'm like sitting there thinking like, crap, normally I'd be sitting down and thinking through this thing. I mean, it takes hours for me to come up with something good. And now I have to do it in real time and come up with the right design pattern, come out with the right abstraction, come out with the right way to, you know, have these Go teams communicate with each other, whatever it is. I mean, it's like there's this pressure in the moment that just feels like insurmountable. And I mean, I think I've been getting better at it, but like for that reason alone, I don't enjoy pairing as much if I'm not the one driving. But I realize that if I'm going to help somebody else, they need to be the one doing the driving, because they're the ones that are going to learn from that experience. And they can't do that if they're just watching you do the work, right? They have to do the work. So it's like a personal problem that I have to kind of get over. But yeah, I'm just pairing is just one of my least favorite things to do. But I realize I have to lean into it, kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the first jobs I had in tech, we were actually pairing a lot. And at that time, I wish that like I was able to, you know, tell myself that like you don't have to pair. This is like only one way, because it was giving me way too much stress, especially as a junior person, that you don't feel that security and so on. If I can, you know, go back in time, I would probably, you know, just like tell myself that like, hey, you know, you can just like ask to work in a, you know, different environment, or like with like regular code reviews or whatever, which I think brings us to the next question. The next question is, what advice would you give yourself at the start of your tech career?
It's a great question.
And I think I answered, you know, right, like I wouldn't necessarily think that pair programming is my thing. So I wouldn't really stress myself out because I'm not really good in it.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. Mine would be something about it being okay to not know everything when you start a project. It was very kind of tempting to fall into this trap and believe that the best software was designed meticulously and then implemented in that kind of waterfall fashion, which is how I assumed things worked. And it wasn't until it took me years, I think, to sort of shed that and instead focus on or realize really that as you're building it, you learn so much that should influence then what you're doing. You feel something back from the code, as well as you're not just in control of it. It kind of feeds back information to you as well. So if as you're building something doesn't quite fit or doesn't feel right, or maybe it's just the abstraction's wrong, something like that, that often in the early days felt like, well, then we'd failed, like the design had failed in some way, when it hadn't, because it had got us to that point where we then had the extra learning that we wouldn't have had without it. So it would be something along those lines. I mean, I assume I'm there for a while, if I could have to go into all this detail, but unfortunately not a snappy little one-liner, but would be something around that, I would say.
Did you get that impression because of your perception of like the other engineering fields? Because, you know, like the feedback loop in software engineering is really fast compared to everything else. You know, if you're designing cars, for example, yeah, you're designing and like you over time, yes, learn, but like it takes years and sometimes decades to actually iterate on things. And in software, it's just like a matter of weeks or days, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. We do have this virtual kind of world that we are operating in, and the rules are different. It has its own laws of physics, kind of. So yeah, that is it. You're right. We can do things differently like that. And I think it was just kind of ignorance, really, to the fact that people, it just seemed like that's the way people did things. I saw, in the places I worked, people would very often ask for, right, well, give me the exact plan of what's going to happen, when it's going to happen by. And it felt like if you don't know these dates of when these things are going to be delivered, then that was you weren't good enough or something. What I didn't realize, which I now know, is nobody knows how long these things are going to take. It's just some of us are honest about that and others, for whatever reason, aren't. But yeah, so those sort of things would be I would say to my young self, and be creative and play around. I mean, when I was very young, what first interested me and got me interested in programming was that I could control this kind of crazy world in ways which were unique and just felt it was amazing to be able to do this. We'd do things like write out the computer games from magazines, and we wrote a pool game once, and we were able to dig around in they had these arrays that described where the pockets were. So we're able to make the pockets really big. And so then we were able to play this pool game with massive pockets, and so that sort of control, and it was a childlike sort of thing of being able to manipulate this kind of world and do these crazy things. And that is still what drives me to do things today. That never changed. So that would be more advice for my young self would be, and I do say this to people, it's okay to play and to do things for fun. I mean, if you do, then your work is much more enjoyable, much easier, and sometimes doesn't even feel like work.
Yeah, totally. Even like it's trying to, estimations is completely, I think, nonsense. But even if you want to estimate, you at least want to play around just a bit, like have a POC or whatever, just kind of like understand what are some of the trade-offs and so on, some of the difficulties and so on before actually saying anything, right?
Yeah, another similar piece of advice I would say as well is if you do TDD or if you into testing a lot, there are times when prototyping and playing around is what's needed for you to figure out what to do. And tests can get in the way sometimes for that. It depends. Because if you sometimes need to know exactly what you're going to build for the test, to get the testing right. So sometimes now I will actually do some prototyping first, get a sense of what kind of thing this is going to be. And then I'll actually start with some tests and make sure I've got some bits that I'm kind of confident are good foundations to build on. But yeah, so again, it tends to come down to being a bit more relaxed and not too strict about things, because it is a complicated process. I mean, writing software is absurdly complicated, and I'm constantly surprised anything's working at all, ever. But it does.
John, you've been quiet.
No, I was just thinking, I guess. For me, I think the biggest thing I would tell myself isn't specific to coding. It's more like what to expect in a work environment.
I thought you were honestly going to say the lottery or something.
Here are your numbers.
It wouldn't be so much go. It would be more about what to expect in the lottery numbers.
No,
sorry, mate.
What I mean is, I think a lot of people graduate and they go take a job and they're like, all right, you're going to be a junior engineer or whatever. You're going to have a mentor. And in their mind, what they expect that to be versus what it actually is very different. I think in your head, you imagine I'm going to have this guy or guy or girl, whatever, who's going to look over my shoulder, show me when I'm doing things wrong, like going to be there. And they forget that this mentor is somebody who has their own job. They have their own work to get done. And like, depending on how much time they have, they can check some things, but you still have to go figure a lot of this out on your own. And I know, like, at some of my first companies I worked at, I would get thrown all these different technologies and all these things. Like Google is especially kind of rough with that, where they have all this internal stuff and it's all really useful, but when you're first learning it all, it can feel overwhelming. So there's a while where you feel like you're just drowning in all this stuff and you really, you just kind of doubt whether you should be there at times. And from talking to people, I've learned now that that's kind of normal. It's just too much for somebody to comprehend all at once. You sort of take it one small step at a time. And you gradually improve and learn about more stuff, and you do the best you can. But it's kind of rough when you're there in the moment, just thinking like, how am I ever going to get through all this? How am I going to figure out how these things work? And you don't have a mentor who's there showing you every step of the way. So it just can be like you feel like you're failing even though you're not. So I'd probably just sort of have a conversation around that sort of aspect of like, it's okay to feel lost or confused or to feel like you don't know everything. Like, that's normal. And, in 10 years from now, you'll be amazed at how much you know and how much you take for granted, that like you'll be almost making the same mistakes that current senior engineers are making, where they're just assuming you know all these things. And it's not intentional. It's just 10 years brings you a lot of knowledge and experience that it's hard to forget that that's all stuff you know.
Yeah, it's a really good point, especially like the questioning. And sometimes you question yourself because the tools are broken or like not documented, whatever. You immediately think that the problem is you, but it's actually like the environment and everything is like always like, nothing is really well polished or like complete in tech. Everything has like lots of bugs, like all these like legacy decisions. So you're somewhat questioning yourself because it doesn't truly align with what is maybe the ideal. And then, you have to accumulate some knowledge and experience in order to understand why things ended up being that way. And, that comfort, I think, comes in eventually because you understand how the industry works and, how like everything is like completely always broken and it really depends on the specific, experience, whatever. I always try to, tell people that like, if you kind of like are struggling with a tool or with any library or whatever, it's not you. It's just like, everything is completely broken all the time. And and the easiest way to do is to be able to access to the right people to ask how it works. So I think, it's just hard when you're very junior, but that's the only way, I guess.
So my advice I'd give to myself, what I've found, and you can all probably attest to this as well, is that over time I've found myself being concerned less with the technical aspect of things and more with the sort of, we like to call it soft skills in this industry, but I think they're just skills, honestly. The lessons basically that I've taken to heart over the last, I don't know, I've forgotten how long I've been doing this at this point now. But basically the core lessons for me, the first one I'd say I'd give to myself and perhaps anybody out there who's had a similar path, is basically you'll never be good at estimating simply because you can't predict the future, right? You might get better by some definition of better at estimating, but there's too many variables that you certainly do not control on the business side, on maybe on the marketing side, and whatever, right? There are things at play that you do not control that, trying to put a specific date or time frame on something, especially something that is like not quite yet defined, it's just futile. I've been doing this for at least 20 years and I've never been successfully able to do that. So at some point I realized, okay, it's not me, right? I can't blame myself for being bad at estimating. It's just the nature of the business, right? It's just the nature of the beast. So chill with that, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of what John said earlier about you feel like you're failing, but you're not. And estimations do that to us as well. We feel like if we don't hit our deadlines, we feel bad. Well, these deadlines were crazy in the first place. And so we shouldn't feel bad, but we do. And when people say, we just want a ballpark number, you're not going to hold you to it. And I just want to say,
lies.
Why did we just work the weekend then?
Right.
Because it does happen.
Lies.
People do tie other commitments to it. It does get into the other side of the business, the other side of it, which is whatever isn't the tech bit. But yeah, so we are asked to, I think, do our best or whatever. But yeah, I just think it's a bad practice. And I like the sort of agile, the idea of be very, expose the progress, show people the progress, and that's a great way to get a sense of what's actually happening, because that's often what people, sometimes that's really what they really want from these estimations. They just want to make sure things are happening, and it might be their job to make sure things are happening. And so there might be other ways that we can do that. But yeah, it is one of those things where you constantly were feeling like we were behind and late, and we weren't. We really weren't. We were very fast and delivering, very rapidly. So it should feel like that.
Yeah, we never value the ambiguity. I think our company is doing a better job, like some sort of like they measure, like if you want to go become a very senior engineer, it's just like your skills to deal with the ambiguity. And it's not about the technical challenges, it's about the business challenges. It's about like, negotiating people, like communicating things. Isn't it like funny that like we call this stuff soft skills? Like these are very hard stuff and it's just like completely not up to you. You may have like some skills or like you may just help the situation, but it's just like extraordinarily complicated. You need to have like really good skills all across, including technical skills to deal with any of this. And you sort of like feel like the only limit is just becoming this type of issues. Like technically, I think everything is possible. I mean, not everything is possible. I think technical problems are easy. The actual limitations are this type of problems. And it's amazing that we underestimate them as soft skills.
Personally, I think these are part of problem-solving skills. And for me, the best way of understanding problems is to basically understand the business you're in. And that means you're talking to people that are not other, techies, right? That are not in the room coding with you or designing with you or whatever, right? So you have to actually step outside of your bubble to understand basically the greater world around you, the people you work with. And, hey, take the salesperson out, for coffee and get them to explain what the process is like. Go sit down with marketing and see what they do all day, right? How to, and talk to operations, right? The business operations folks and see what you're going to get a view of the business that is going to inform how you solve problems and actually recommend solutions that keep moving a ball forward, right? So, but that starts with people and being able to interact with people. So along those lines, I usually tell people like, look, at the end of the day, the tech is a tool that enables some entity to arrive at a particular goal. Be that goal money or, doing good in the world, whatever the case may be, right? Tech is a tool, right? And you're a specialist, who knows how to use the tool. So tech doesn't matter as much as people, right? So, be kind, right? And learn to interact, right? Give of yourself. Give and you will receive, right? Not money, but, time. Like give of yourself, right? So, and basically along those lines, the last thing I'll add is that basically I've found and over time, I like to use that phrase, sort of ego is the enemy. Like I found like over time, like basically your ego yourself is always putting obstacles in your way, right? The whole thing I talked about earlier about when I pair, I feel the intense pressure to perform, right? That's ego, right? That's basically saying, hey, you better look good. Our survival depends on it, right? so it's like, there's constantly, you have this voice in the back of your head like saying, hey, you messed up here, man. Like you shouldn't have done that. Or you got to say the perfect thing here. Or you got to be the perfect person here. I mean, that's like basically just causing you to act a certain way, causing you to act selfishly, causing you to to pretend to be things you're not. All these things, that's just part of the self, and keeping tabs stay on top of that. I mean, honestly, that's the next decade over my life that I'm honestly trying to work on, is basically trying to identify when ego's taking me for a ride and just kicking them out the car.
Great. Yeah, that little small voice in your head that tells you not to say things. What is that? How do you get one?
You want one of those?
Is it like an in-app purchase? That'd be good if you could just in-app purchase stuff into your brain, wouldn't it? We think of like it's the Matrix, but it wouldn't be free, would it? You're going to have to pay for that if you want to learn how to fly that helicopter. Sit down, put this in your head, but put your credit card here. That's how it would be. But that's great advice, Johnny, actually. And I also do recognize that. And that's the thing about finding a good partner and a good team to work with, is if you can, if they're decent people as well, it's easier to get over some of that things. And you can sometimes be honest about it and say, yeah, do you know what? I think I was unreasonable there, or whatever. You can sort of be a little bit more open about these kinds of things, and then you can move past it and stuff. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think in order to let go of the ego, you need to be vulnerable a bit. And, this also works the same way in relationships, any sort of relationship. And I think a couple of years ago, I was in a sort of a situation where I finally ended up feeling more comfortable being vulnerable, and it completely changed my life. I finally understood, what I need to do and to do the next thing. And now, similarly to Johnny, probably I will spend the next 10 years working on this type of skills.
I think it goes to show that when Matt talks about pair programming all this time, he talks about a co-founder that he's been doing this with for a long, long time. And whenever you talk about like when you feel uncomfortable, it's with new people. It's with people you don't have that trust with or that relationship with. And I suspect that's part of the reason why, like, I know I'm included in this. I don't like doing live streaming myself coding on like Twitch or something, because I'm like, if I make a mistake, there's going to be that one person there who like makes a big deal out of it. And it's like, we all make mistakes, but somebody's going to be like, that guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like, you know, he did that mistake. So you just get worried and paranoid. But like, I also know that I've done screen sharing, like to either to review code or to look at some tough parts of a code base. At a startup I was at a while back, and it was like the actual founder and I both did this all the time, but we had a really good relationship, and that just made it like I didn't mind jumping in there and being like, I have no idea what's going on here or how to deal with this, and it was easy to solve. And like we both had that relationship where he could do that with me too, and it solved a lot of problems. But when you don't know somebody, it's hard because you're like, how are they going to react when like that's what I have to tell them is like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, from a tech leadership point of view, it's a red flag when somebody never says I don't know. If there's somebody who's always certain about everything, then obviously they're not. Something else is going on. So that's a good bit of advice, I think, for people is, and again, it's very easy for me to say this, and we're now more senior, so it is easier. We have to struggle to remember what it was really like. Although it's not that many years ago, is it? Come on.
Some good leaders actually like create some opportunity, but make themselves look vulnerable. Like they even actually like just create situations that like they can easily like say that like, hey, I don't know, we need to understand this, whatever. So they would like just like keep reminding you that like nothing. It's not you. It's not your lack of knowledge or experience or whatever. So that's like one step I think further. Saying I don't know is like a good step, but like if you actively are creating those moments, that just really gives a lot of comfort to people around you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know I did a pair programming session a few years ago with a more junior developer, and we were plowing through something, and it was kind of halfway through I realized that I'm probably just going way too fast and making this look like I probably look really good doing it, but I make this look really hard, and like you have to be some amazing coder to be able to do it, which of course isn't the case. And so yeah, you're right, you have to sort of be mindful of that as well. I was just doing my thing, trying to solve a problem, and I wasn't bringing people along with me in that case. So that was an important lesson for me. I think it is kind of a great way to work, but yeah, it does rely on that sort of trust in the teams and things. And I think you're right, being vulnerable and admitting, yeah, I don't know about this. We're going to have to figure it out together, and we'll succeed together, or we won't succeed together. It's better because you remove any of this sort of, a lot of these personal, difficult challenges that people feel. You can remove a lot just by having a slightly different culture like that. Yeah.
I think you even see it with like how people react to issues. Like we've all heard those stories about like, oh, some junior developer deleted the whole database or something like that. And how the company responds to that, like demonstrates how they're going to take that vulnerability, like how they're going to treat it. It's a very clear indicator. So like when you see a company that's like, well, this happened, it shouldn't have been able to happen. Like we're not blaming him. Here's how we're fixing it. Then you're like, okay, I have way more confidence in, being vulnerable here. But when you see the person get fired, you're like, well, time to not let anybody know about my mistakes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's a bad signal. Yeah. Cloudflare did it recently. There was an issue, that was just a bad config file that got pushed or something. And they're just sort of transparent about it, open about it. And people were asking, and someone said, is this person going to be fired or something? And the answer was no. I think the CTO said, no, these things happen. It's a process issue we have to look at. And I think that is the right attitude. Yeah, because otherwise what happens? Think about what happens if you create these sort of toxic cultures. I mean, this is a whole other area, I think, for another time. I believe our hour has come up now. Thank you very much to everybody for joining me, Jana, John, and Johnny, and we'll see you next time on Go Time.
All right, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Go Time. If you're not yet, hang with us and go for Slack. We have a channel called Go Time FM. Look it up, you'll find us. Hang with us during the live shows, connect with other members of the community, share stories, share codes, share coffee recipes, whatever. It's a lot of fun. Also, we have discussions at changelog.com on every episode. Head to changelog.com/GoTime, find this episode, and discuss it with the community. Also, thanks to Fastly, our bandwidth partner, Rollbar for helping us move fast and fix things, and Linode for hosting the Changelog platform. Our music is produced by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. And if you want to hear more awesome podcasts like this, subscribe to our master feed. It's one feed to rule them all, plus some extras that only hit the master feed. Head to changelog.com/master or search for Changelog Master in your podcast client. You'll find us. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.